Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the October OER Showcase series, where we will be discussing the Open Educational Resources Anatomy Hub. The project is based out of the University of Colorado Anschutz and is led by Dr. Maureen Stabio, but has an extensive number of Colorado partners. And today's speakers is Ezra Heshin and Zach Stutter. I will go ahead and turn it over to you both. And
Hi, everyone. My name is Ezra Heshin. I'm the project manager for the Modern Human Anatomy Open Educational Resources project group. And today we are going to be talking about the kind of the goals we had for our original iteration of the CDHE grant and what we accomplished and what we are offering to Colorado institutions and the public at large. So I'll just jump right in. So this is called the Open Access 3D Printed Organs, and more specifically, what we're going to be highlighting is the Modern Human Anatomy OER Hub that we have, where we host what we're going to be talking about. So first of all, this is a collaborative grant, and so we have a lot of different collaborators. I believe 10 to 12 faculty. The numbers changed across 7 different institutions. And it's been a pleasure to work with all of them. And it's been great times, great results. And so just want to acknowledge them. Also want to acknowledge the donors that we've used. So we used human donors for the collection of the data and the creation of these models. And the gift of life is of the body after life is a huge benefit. We do not take it lightly. So we want to say thank you to our donors and also acknowledge the Colorado State Anatomical Board who processed who collaborated with us on receiving the donors, and they handle all the legal and the collecting donors information and the bodies and everything. And so we really say a huge thank you to them. And so we'll go ahead and start with the background of this project. So why are we doing this? So hands-on models for anatomical education are huge because when it comes to anatomy students, and particularly we're affiliated with a master's program in modern human anatomy. When our students take a look at 2D as illustrations, textbooks, MRI data, CT scan data, it can be hard to wrap your head around what this looks like spatially. So a lot of one big way that we illustrate for them is through plastic models, something they can hold and say, oh, that's what that is. And just to give you an idea of what these things can cost, we have this chart here where we got the skull on the left from Carolina models, and it's $170. A real human skull that's been preserved is around 1,000. And so these are not cheap. And you see the Carolina models for the here on the heart, $230, $680 for a brain model. And when you get to the plastinates, of course, now these plastinates, just in case anybody's not familiar with the term, it's an actual human organ that has been put in a vat of acetone, basically, and through a silicone process where they remove the water molecules, replace it with silicone molecules, they are able to preserve the exact structure of the organ, and yet it's safe to touch. You don't have to wash your hands, and it preserves for a very long time. So that's what I mean when I say plastinates. And the process is quite expensive, so you can expect those to be a lot more expensive. And they're great for what they do. And I think I wouldn't say they're ever not necessary. I think for our master's students at a master's level, graduate level, they are necessary. But when we're talking about high school, undergrad, that's where I think our 3D printed models can really shine and help, especially when we're talking about high schools and community colleges. This is where the OER models that we have are really great for educators at that level. And they've also been a huge help when we've put them in our own courses, and they've been a huge help there as well. I'll get more into the the survey statistics later. So just in general, 3D printing has been really blowing up everywhere, but in our world in anatomical education, it's been huge as well. Um, uh, there have been a few different journal articles that I'm familiar with where it's just overwhelmingly positive influence in anatomical education. Specifically, we've worked directly with Monash University in Australia, and the model you see here, we actually have some of these models on campus, and they do really good work with really complex structures that can be a lot of times commercial models don't have the exact structures that we're trying to show. So when you can do it, process the data and then make the 3D print yourself, then it's really it brings education to the next level. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Zach. Zach is better on the technical side of things, and so take it away, Zach.
All right. Hi, everyone. Oh, yeah, I'll let you do it over there. So my name is Zachary Stetter. I work at the Modern Human Anatomy program in their 3D printing lab. I'm basically in charge of a lot of the upkeep of the printers. My background is actually in 3D animation and visual effects, so I have a lot of background when it comes to 3D modeling and designing. And then I have my master's degree in human anatomy, so that kind of helps me pair the two together. So I was brought on to this project as kind of originally a consultant to be talk about the 3D printing and stuff, and get a lot of the project off the ground. And I've been working here ever since. When I came onto the project, we talked about kind of the biggest barriers for teachers in this field. And we had three main areas. The first area is choosing a printer. The next is finding or creating models. And the third is integrating these models into courses. So to start off, we're going to talk about choosing a printer because the market is full of a bunch of different types of printers and a bunch of different brands. So part of our goal was kind of to test a couple out to see what would be the most optimal for educators who are especially really new in this world of 3D printing. So when looking at printer, you'll see a lot of terms like FDM, SLA, SLS. And the two we're going to focus on are FDM and SLA. Click on the slide. So FDM just means that there is a spool of plastic attached to the printer somewhere, and this spool of plastic is fed into an extruder that will extrude the print onto a print plate. SLA is the other kind of big type. It's what we call a resin printer. So instead of a spool of plastic, there is a vat of resin that has a UV light underneath it. And that light will cure the resin in layers on a build plate that will rise out of the resin pool. There's pros and cons to each. Generally speaking, resin printers have a higher resolution because they're working on a micron scale with the light curing, versus the filament printers aren't necessarily as high quality, but there's a lot of post-processing that goes into the resin printers, as well as them just generally being more toxic and a little more difficult to work with and also more expensive. So there is that kind of trade-off there. Filament printer, one of the main advantages outside of it being cheaper, a little bit easier to get into, in my opinion, and generally safer, is with filament, you can do something called multi-material printing, which is something we're also experimenting with, where some printers have multiple tool heads that you can load different kinds of filament into, so you can kind of mix and match both colors and the different properties of different filaments. So there are filaments that are softer and stretchier like rubber, and then there are others that are more hard plastic. So Filament printers give you the ability to mix and match, where resin you have to print out of a single bed of resin. The printers we're showing here are kind of the ones that we often recommend to people when they ask us about printers specifically. The top two are the multi-filament printers I was telling you about. That's why they're more expensive. The kind of general rule is the more tool heads are on the printer, the more expensive it will be. The one on the left is called the Prusa XL. It gets its name because it's so big. We can actually print a femur inside of the print bed, so it has a very large print area. The one next to it is called the Bamboo H2D. It's a little newer on the market, but people have been loving it because it does a lot of the kind of upkeep of a 3D printer on its own. So it's a lot more handy for newer 3D printers. And on the bottom row, we have the single filament printers, which can usually get just as high as detail, but their drawback is since they only have one extruder head, they can only print one type of filament at a time. So if you want to change the color or properties, you either have to manually pause the print in the middle to change out the filament, or find different ways to kind of print pieces separately, then fit them together. But you'll also see they're a lot cheaper. And I think we try to keep that in mind with this project because the whole point of the project is accessibility of these models. We try to make as many of these models, if not all of them, able to print on a single filament printer because we want to make sure this can reach as wide of an audience as we can. As you can see, one of those printers is $200. It's not necessarily the best, and you'll have to tinker with it a bit more. But the way we are creating these models, the people with those printers can still get one of those printers. Ray, that is a good question. We'll go into it a little bit later, actually. So we'll talk about why you'll want to choose different kinds of filaments. So after that whole ordeal of choosing a printer, which is a mountain on its own, the next big thing is finding or creating models. So the easiest option for this is finding models online. There's a lot of different websites that will sell professional models that you can either print or show off in a 3D viewer. The big kind of drawback is the more professional and high resolution you want these models to be, the more expensive they will be. That does come with the kind of caveat that in 3D, because it's digital, once you buy it once, you can print it or use it as many times as you want. So there is that kind of quid pro quo, but some of these models can get super expensive, especially if you're looking for high detail areas, if there's even models out there. There are also free websites that have models that the 3D community will just make and give out for free. Some include like printables or Thingiverse. The problem here is, especially in anatomical education, these aren't necessarily the most accurate models, and it might just not pertain to what it is you're teaching. So it's great if you can find something on here, but it's often hard to find exactly what it is you're looking for in an accurate way. So we are trying to tackle this problem by creating the MHA OER Anatomy Hub that Ezra was talking about earlier. This hub is going to be, and currently actually is kind of a place where we've put all of our 3D models that we've created through various techniques, and they're all free to download for anyone that wants to use them in education. A lot of these models also come with packets that talk about best printing techniques, labeling the models and giving kind of little worksheets for classes. Alongside that, we're also storing other things on this hub. like DICOM data sets that can be used for education. There are de-identified DICOMs that have been donated to us. We also have some learning modules up that range from a variety of topics that a lot of them have been created by previous student educators. So we're trying to just make this a big open source place for people to be able to access educational materials that they might struggle to find elsewhere or afford on a commercial scale. Next. So this is one of the spots we have right now in that OER hub. It's called Sketchfab. This is an online 3D model viewer that we upload a lot of our scanned and created models to. All of the files here you can actually download directly from the website with a Creative Commons license and print them yourself. But the other advantage to using this site is for people who may not have access to 3D printers either. Because this is an online 3D viewer, a teacher can just click on one of the models and it will bring up a 3D view that they can zoom in and rotate around. And a lot of these have labels on them as well. So even without a 3D printer available to them, these models could still serve an educational purpose in the classroom. Next slide, please. So with that, we have a couple different options in how we create these models. The first option is one that if any of you are in the kind of anatomy background, you may have heard this one. It's called 3D Slicer. This is a open source software that is used to interpret basically CT or MRI data sets, DICOM files. And what we do is we can upload these DICOM files into 3D Slicer and then tell the computer, hey, I want to segment out this tissue. It's in this kind of general area and grayscale. And the program will go through the DICOM data slides and highlight it and turn it into a 3D object. We've done this with a lot of things, especially in neuro. It has its pros and cons. One pro is that it can get very specific data sets for us. So if we have a data set of a DICOM with someone with like a pathology that we want to segment out, such as this hemorrhagic stroke, this provides us a really kind of precise way to do that because we're getting this data directly from a DICOM set. A little bit of a drawback is that the final resolution depends a lot on how high quality that DICOM set is. So higher resolution DICOMs will obviously give higher resolution final models, but we have found that negative space is actually where we get some of our best models, such as that complex neurovasculature on the right-hand side. With that, because it was filling in an empty space on the DICOM, it gave us a really nice clean model. Another option that is available that we did is scanning models. So this specific scanner is probably not going to be accessible to most people. It's called the Artex Spider Scanner, and it's a $30,000 machine that basically, if we go to the next slide, it takes a ton of pictures of an object and then converts it into 3D space. So our process with this is taking one of those plastinated organs that Ezra was talking about earlier and scanning it with this machine. It will take hundreds of pictures in a process called photogrammetry, where it feeds all these pictures back into a program. The program looks for different landmarks on the images and uses that to recreate the model in 3D. So it's a incredibly precise, pretty easy to use piece of technology. that gets texture, it gets negative space, it gets all the details of the model. So we've been able to use this to make really high quality models. Now, of course, the drawback is the price, and this isn't something that's going to be accessible to anyone. So that's why we've tried to scan as much as we can with this and upload it to that Sketchfab workspace where anyone can access those files. But if someone needs to like do their own photogrammetry, there's actually smartphone apps that do similar things. So we use something called Polycam. It does require a subscription to it for models, but I believe that there are some other apps out there that I haven't experimented with that might not require that. But it basically does the same thing as that scanner does, where you can put an organ or whatever you're trying to convert into 3D onto a turntable and just take a couple hundred pictures of it, which sounds like a lot, but it goes very quickly. So you take a bunch of pictures, and then the smartphone uploads the pictures to an outside program that will do the same thing that the RTX scanner does in um, kind of cutting out whatever the object you're scanning is and then creating a 3D model around it. The iPhone isn't going to be as high quality as the scanner, but um, you can still get some really impressive models out of it. The last, kind of, sorry, um, method. Thank you. The last method we talked about it, or we worked with, is creating a model de novo, which just means that I can start from scratch, and with my background in modeling and animation, I'm able to make some of the models that we use for education. Um, I have to do a lot of this anyways to kind of clean up some of our models from scanning and stuff, but it's the problem with this option, it's the most time consuming. It takes a lot of skill because you have to understand a bunch of these programs and how they talk to each other and what exactly you're trying to do in these programs. So it's definitely the most difficult of the three options as far as getting a model. But on the flip side, you can get really kind of high resolution models that do exactly what you want them to do. Um, this is like a brain. This is a brain where we show all the vasculature and nuclei within the brainstem. So while it does take longer to do, you can get some fantastic results out of it. This is example from Blender. So the kind of two big 3D modeling programs that a lot of people talk about are Maya and Blender. Maya is the industry standard right now, but it does cost quite a lot of money. Blender is a free open source community, so you can download it and use it completely for free and get, I think, comparable results to Maya. It takes a little bit longer to learn, but after that initial learning curve, you can get some really fantastic results out of it. So it's definitely a more difficult path for creating models, but it's um, something that I think everyone should dabble in at least a little bit, because you can really make something specific to what you're wanting to teach. Next. So general workflow, as we kind of already talked about, is for us was step one, either scanning with the Artec 3D or the Polycam app. From there, we were able to bring into Maya or Blender, where I was able to do some touch-ups and edits to make sure it fit all the kind of parameters we wanted for our educational purposes. From there, we loaded it onto Sketchfab and added all of those interactive elements I talked about, where we can move around the model and label it. So if people don't have a printer, they can use that. We also make sure those models are optimized to print. And I'll talk in the next slide about how we kind of edited them edited these models after they were printed so they could be played around with a bit more. And then making sure all of these files are on that Anatomy Hub that we talked about to have everyone get access to them. So to kind of round off these barriers, we're going to talk about integrating the models into courses, some of the challenges we faced, and just overall results with that. So the first way we work to integrate these with courses is taking models that we've made and put them side by side with more of the traditional like teaching tools. One of the examples that we did was in a neuropathology lab. I created a bunch of 3D brains out of resin that had structures embedded in them. And then we put them next to real donor brains that also had the structures. And students found that it helped them kind of identify the structures in the real brains because they're able to see just like the highlighted portions of what they're looking for. So this is actually one of the models that I created. It's a ventricular model with MS, and you're actually able to take off half of the ventricular system to hold it in your hand and turn it around and really get a feel for the volume and what the lesions look like. And it all attaches back on with magnets. Sorry, the thing is kind of blurring out a little bit. There we go. Another model we did was creating a deep brain stimulation model where we have an example we can show to a patient of what it looks like when we're targeting different parts of the brain with the deep brain stimulation. So being able to hold and use these models, a lot of students found that they're able to understand the spatial relationships a lot more clearly. And that kind of moved us into our next model we worked with. Get ready to mute that. So the next model we worked with, or we worked on creating is what I alluded to earlier, with the white erase coding. So we were able to print models that we then coded in a white erase spray where you can write on them in these expo markers, and then you can wipe them off like it was a dry erase board. The issue we ran into was the marker would get caught in 3D print lines just because even though they're so fine, the liquid kind of just seeped between them. So we had some erasing issues. You can tell a little bit. This is actually one of our earlier models that we did. And you can see some of the layer lines on there where marker got really stuck. And we worked on fixing that with something that we call acetone vapor smoothing. We discovered a filament called ABS that melts in the presence of acetone. So we take our model printed in ABS and then put it in a chamber with a little acetone in it and then vaporize the acetone. And that kind of melts the layers of plastic together in such a way that when we coat it with that white erase spray, it wipes off much easier. So we've been working a lot with these writable models specifically because they got a lot of good feedback of students really liked the ability to draw and annotate directly on the model that they were learning from. They just kind of needed a little bit more of a better cleanup solution. So we've done a lot of work with these and gotten some great responses. I'm gonna turn it back over to Ezra to talk about our last project in the series.
Thank you, Zach. Yeah, so I think Zach mentioned briefly about the different models that we sent out for this last year. We were we focused mainly on heart and brain models, hemisected brain models. So I don't know if we have, there we go. It's the one that, if you can see my screen here, this is the hemisected brain model that we sent out to our collaborators for use across it was 11 or 12 courses across our collaborating institutions. So it got in front of a lot of different students. We have survey data that I'll present shortly from those students and illustrating what their experiences with it. But I think one of the first use cases we had with these 3D printed models was actually designed in, I want to say 2023 by one of our modern human anatomy students. And we so in this slide here, this is Dr. Maria Stavio. She's the principal investigator for this grant. And what she's doing here is teaching third-year medical students about the arterial structure of the which provides oxygenated blood supply to the brain. And it's called the Circle of Willis. And so she's presenting the 3D printed model here. This model was designed by one of our modern human anatomy students and then printed. And the whole class loved it. As you can see the way the survey data here, they really liked using it in conjunction with other methods of illustration. One of the problems was that it kept breaking because they were so fragile. And Zach was actually able to fix this recently, and I'll show you the new model. I know my window's small, but this is what it looks like. And now you can just kind of, it springs back up. It's made out of a rubbery plastic. I believe somebody asked, why would you use a rubbery plastic? This is one of the use cases for the rubbery plastic. You can just drop it and nothing happens to it. Whereas if we used a rigid plastic like we were before, it would completely shatter. So that's one of the benefits of a multi-filament printer, which are becoming cheaper. Not as cheap as we'd like, but it'll happen eventually. Again, we do focus on making all of our models accessible to the highest degree. So you can print them with that cheaper $200 printer. It won't have a completely fall-proof model, but it'll still be accurate and usable. So let's go into some survey data. So we were able to get we have survey data from 574 students across 7 different institutions, I believe 11 to 12 classes, and overwhelmingly positive feedback. Help them engage with the concept being presented in lectures and in labs. So visualizing spatial relationships, go into some others right here. The ease of use, enhancing engagement, recommending for future students, pretty high level of satisfaction. And the one at the bottom here is a metric that I liked. How often did you use them? One of the few complaints we had from the students was that there weren't enough models to go around. They wanted to take them home, use them in their homework, and so that's actually something we've talked about with different collaborators, is actually like having them print more at their institutions for like a library systems where they can check out these models for students to take home. And if they take them home and they lose them or they break them, it's not a big deal. You can just print more. So, and the most important metric at the end, does it help your learning? And people really liked the students really liked as far as how helping them learn and grasp the concepts, quite literally. So before we go to the Q&A, we would love your feedback. If you guys want to scan this QR code, it takes you to a form. If you have ideas about, hey, what we work on next, we'd love to hear that. So go ahead and scan the QR code and let us know what you want us to work on next. We applied for the latest iteration of the CDHE OER grant, and should we receive that, fingers crossed, then we are going to be working on a couple different new models. I'll give you a couple examples. We're going to be working on a whole osteology set, so different bones across the whole human body. We're going to be working on lungs. That's going to be a fun one. I'm really looking forward to that one. We're also going to be working on kidneys. And there's some other models as well that we're considering for it as well. Again, if you'd like to scan that QR code and add to our list, we'd love that. And one final thing before we go to Q&A, we want to acknowledge our some other people that were not listed earlier, members of the MHA or Modern Human Anatomy OER project team, and some individual contributors down there. And all right, we'll open it up for Q&A. I know we already have some. Yes, I will put a link in the chat. Okay, Zach's gonna do that. But yeah, let us know what your questions are, and
Turn
I
on
think
your sound in case I want this. I'll keep myself muted over here.
okay. And I'll go ahead and start with the questions that we had earlier. Okay, Ray, going back to your question. So go ahead and turn this. I'll leave that up actually. So for why somebody would want a rubbery plastic or a hard plastic, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you want to have a more rigid model, that maybe it's a little bit brittle, but it doesn't bend when you touch it, kind of like our brain that we showed you earlier, then that would be a use case for that. Most models that we do are printed in what's called PLA, polylactic acid, which is just it's a basic plastic. And it prints very easily, easy to work with. But some of our more specialized use cases use the rubbery kind of it's called TPU, and that is the one I showed you earlier where you can just flatten the model and it doesn't break.
Yeah, so especially for Venus or anything arterial, we like to use TPU just because they generally turn out so thin that most students handling them will inevitably break it. And I also get really tired of gluing them back together. So that's my own laziness, but it also helps the students a lot. Another use case that we're looking into, we haven't perfected it quite yet, is we're doing some like tendons and stuff in shoulder complexes and hip complexes where we'll have the bones printed as rigid PLA, regular hard plastic, and then tendons and ligaments printed in that TPU, so we can kind of illustrate how they bend a lot better. There's also, outside of the softer rubbery TPU filament, there's other things like there's something called PVA. That's a special type of filament that actually dissolves in the water. So we like to use that type of filament when we're trying to print supports in really confined areas. So instead of having to pick out all the supports out of a tiny gap, we can just dunk the model into a mug of water and it will melt off. So there's a lot of different filaments with a lot of different properties, and to kind of further anatomy education, we want to try and combine them to get the most tactile experience.
And got a couple questions about working with visually impaired. Oh no, one is about visually impaired. So visually impaired, we have not worked with any, I mean, across more than just wearing glasses or needing corrective vision. But that's a good point. I think one of the materials that we're going to be using to print hopefully the lung model is actually made for prosthetics. And so we actually we don't have it with us right now, but Zach made a model of a hand with internal skeletal anatomy. And it's creepily, it's odd to hold because it feels like a little real hand.
It's unsettling.
It's a little unsettling, but the material for that is meant to reflect actually human skin. And so we're hoping to use that for the lung model and actually looking to inflate, with air. So I think that would be great for people who are visually impaired, being able to feel that and having a very accurate texture. We don't work with any deaf and blind schools, Anna. But again, that's a great idea. I've never even thought about that. So thank you for bringing it up. I can see that working pretty well, actually.
I think while we don't directly work with any deaf or blind schools, we do one of the things we make sure of on Sketchfab is that we're ADA compliant with how we upload stuff though. So all of the models that we upload have a description of exactly what the model is that I think the site can help read out to explain what people are looking at. But yeah, we try to make everything as inclusive as possible on that front.
Yes, Joyce, Nia Anatomy would be a good, I believe, do we have a student working on these right now?
So I know right now we have a group that's working on a hip complex. I think eventually we're working to have a student right now in MHA that wants to do a knee complex. And yeah, Anna, absolutely. As I think we want to have this OER open to any educational grade levels. That's part of the purpose. So anyone can go and download these models or view them on Sketchfab for education.
And I'm just gonna throw this up really quickly. Hope you can see this. This is our OER Anatomy Hub. And so different options here. We have our plastination library, DICOM files, educational modules. And we also, this is the part I really want to show, is the Sketchfab. So if we go here, we have all the different models that we can just go to all models here. That's where that was.
The cross section slices is animated. That's why it looks like
Oh, okay. But we can go through here and scroll through the models that we have. This is the heart model that we distribute to all our collaborators, so you can also download that and print it if you'd like. And so this is the one that Zach actually is has been working on recently, just finished. But I don't know, can we, or is this, no, this is animated, so it's not annotated. I want to show the annotation
Yeah.
as well.
Let's see, I think
Is the whole heart with great vessels?
I think so. I think I have annotations. No.
Some of these have some really detailed annotations that we can use for
I think it's that one.
teaching. There it is.
Yeah.
So if you click on these numbers, then you can tell this is the pulmonary trunk. This is the aortic arch. Here's another artery.
Brachiocephalic.
There you go. I am not an anatomist. So you can just go through this whole model, click on it, and see the different nomenclature.
And if you scroll down on the little sidebar, down here is the description of everything, talks a little bit about it. And then there is I think you have to be logged in to do it, but there is a download 3D model button, which you can download that and throw that on your printer.
Let's go back to the chat.
That's great. Thanks, Anna.
Oh, and one more point on the knee, related to the knee, the joints are really interesting. We did, I don't have the model right here with me, but we did actually Zach's gonna go down and get that model for us. But we did a shoulder model where we actually illustrated I'm gonna wait for Zach because I don't want to screw up the name. But we were able to illustrate the different intersecting bones with the ligaments, with the ligaments being represented by the more flexible kind of material and the bones being represented by the more rigid material. And then you can actually flex the shoulder a bit, and it's pretty cool to see. It really helps. It helped me understand the relationship between the two. As a high school, yes, we actually are working with a high school, Aurora Science and Technology High School, and the anatomy teacher there, he he integrated our models into the class, and he's had good success with it so far.
No shoulder model, but here's an example of some of the osteology stuff we've already started. So we have a femur, and this is one of the uses of that multi-filament printer where we can actually color in all of the different muscle attachment groups. So we have this, we have a radius of ulna, we have a humerus. So we have a bunch of different bones already. And students have already found these super useful in going in before lab, or going in using these before lab to see muscle attachments before they do dissections or before they study osteology to get a good idea of where things attach. And students have found this a lot more helpful than looking at a textbook page because they can actually turn the bones over in their hand and see where these muscles attach. And they the other big thing is these are a lot cheaper to print than to buy similar models online. Each of these, I think this was the most expensive one because it's so big. And I think this guy costed $18 around to print. So, and again, if this breaks in the lab, it's a lot cheaper to replace than the actual commercial models. It shows a little bit of, layer lines from the printer and stuff, but it gets the point enough across that it's not hindering any educational stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Also, I'll throw it out. If any of you guys work with work at a institution, an educational institution, be it high school, undergrad, graduate, and you'd like to collaborate with us, please let me know. I'll put my contact info in the chat. But we'd love to work with you and get our models out there more, and help you accomplish your educational goals. Yeah, Anna, please send me an email. I just put my email in the chat, and yeah, love to talk to you about that.
Also happy to answer any 3D printing questions or anything along the realm of 3D modeling, animation designing, stuff like that. So if you have any of those questions, you can also reach out to Ezra and he'll put you in contact with me as well.
Do we have any other final questions?
It's easy.
All right, I guess not. Thank you so much, Ezra and Zach, for a fantastic presentation today. And for anyone who's enjoying this as a recorded webinar, please do reach out to either presenter with any follow-up questions. The OER Anatomy Hub is one of my favorite grantees, and is doing incredible work, and it's just really exciting to be able to showcase it out. So thank you both so much.
Thank you, and thank you everybody who
Yeah.
was able to see our presentation. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for the opportunity.